Okay, so, excuse me. This is my week 4 assignment. I did mine on judicial misconduct. And so, to start us off, I'm just going to share a bit of what I learned about the American criminal justice system to start. So, I'm not super familiar with criminal justice. I'm getting definitely more familiar with it this class. I did binge How to Get Away with Murder like a long time ago, so I actually have been picking up a lot of connections, especially through this assignment particularly. But I did learn a little bit more about the interconnected subsystems and how each one of them faces their own set of challenges. I'd say that one of the major obstacles courts face is ensuring that criminal procedures are followed correctly, which is super important for maintaining fairness and protecting the rights of individuals. Criminal procedures are governed by a set of rules which are embedded in the Constitution, Bill of Rights, state laws, federal acts, etc. And these kind of provide a framework for how cases should be handled from arrest through sentencing. But I'd say that when criminal procedure is violated, it obviously leads to significance in consequences, appeals, overturned verdicts, etc., retrials, which is just kind of something that prolongs the justice process and denies the victims the closure that they deserve through the excessive time, or what they thought was the truth really wasn't. So, in addition to this, courts also struggle with budgetary problems, and that can have a big impact on their ability to function efficiently. But my main topic about an issue in the criminal justice system is judicial misconduct and how it includes conflicts of interest, bias, inappropriate conduct. That can have a serious consequence on both the fairness of trials, and that will later on affect public trust in the justice system, which is something we see through the media all the time. Judges are tasked with ensuring their impartiality. I don't think I said that right for some reason. And upholding the law. When they engage in this kind of unethical behavior that we might see, it really does undermine the judicial process. And it can be intentional or unintentional, which is something I learned through this assignment too, that sometimes they might not even realize what they're doing is wrong. Because I always am under the impression that it is intentional, but sometimes it truly is unintentional. So with judicial misconduct, it can lead to wrongful convictions, lack of accountability, and loss of confidence within the courts. This kind of misconduct threatens the very foundation of the criminal justice system, and it makes it essential to have a strong oversight, ethical guidelines, etc. By addressing this issue, we can help ensure that justice is served fairly and impartially for all individuals, regardless of their status, wealth, race, gender, sexual orientation, because we do embed in our system that we need to have liberty and justice for all. So, by definition, over my readings this week, I came to the conclusion that judicial misconduct is when a judge breaks the ethical standards of their profession, and this has many sub-branches, though. It can include bias, bribery, abuse of power. So I think that some examples that would go pretty well with this is failing to disclose a conflict of interest, improperly communicating about a case, engaging in inappropriate political activities, ruling in favor of a political party, even when the evidence does not support it at all. Or you could have a personal relationship with a party involved in a case, which is bad. Moving on. So, taking a look at this graph that was provided by the University of Wisconsin Law School and through their research. But judicial conduct commissions in many states are receiving way more complaints than usual. So of the 39 states with the available data, 27 of those saw an increase in complaints from 2019 to 2022, which is something you can see on the graph if you look towards it down there. So 17 of those had a rise of at least 20%, which is statistically anything over 5%, I believe, is considered significant. So obviously that's a big jump. So the biggest increase was in Minnesota, that makes me wonder why Minnesota in particular. I'm not sure if there was a case that went along with it. I'll definitely have to do more research about that. But this makes me believe that there's an increase, that these increases show a decline in trust in the judicial system. Or other people believes that the pandemic had something to do with the rise, because so many court dates got pushed back and some things got canceled. So I thought that was interesting that other people suggested the pandemic's impact. But many states are seeing higher complaint numbers in 2023 with increases ranging from 4 to 84% over 2022, which is insane. And this just makes me interested in seeing what the data is going to be like for 2024, because I couldn't find anything specifically on that yet. But especially with all the political drama going on right now, it'll definitely be interesting to see that there might be a significant jump again. So I thought that was cool. So just to look into the historical background of judicial misconduct, it kind of undermines the essential trust between the judiciary and the public, which is obviously vital for a functioning legal system. When judges act unethically, such as engaging in conflicts of interest or so on, it can lead to an unjust outcome, and it could, and most often does, with the media today, erode public confidence within the courts. And this issue has a very, very long history within the United States, with various measures implemented over time to address and prevent such misconduct. So, the regulation of judicial ethics in the United States began with Kennesaw Mountain Landis. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, so I apologize if I didn't. But a federal district judge who served from 1905 to 1921 was appointed as the first commissioner of Major League Baseball in 1921, a position he held concurrently with his judicial duties, and his dual roles raised concerns about potential conflicts of interest and the need for clear ethical guidelines for judges. I thought that was super interesting because I'm a student athlete on campus, and I wouldn't really think of being the commissioner for Major League Baseball would be a conflict of interest, but I guess it was. So I thought that was interesting. But in response to concern, the Judicial Conduct and Disability Act of 1980 was enacted, establishing a formal process of investigating allegations of judicial misconduct or disability. This act allows any person to file a complaint against a federal judge, and it aims to ensure accountability and maintain public trust in the judiciary. I do think that is definitely a plus that was enacted in 1980 rather than closer times, because with mainstream media today, that would be certainly an issue if it wasn't enacted until recent times. But as I digress, despite these historical efforts, misconduct remains a very significant turn. A comprehensive review of cases from 2008 to 2019 revealed that 1,509 judges resigned, retired, or were publicly disciplined following accusations of misconduct. Additionally, another 3,613 cases involved states disciplining judges but keeping key detail, including the identities of the judges, confidential. So that's interesting as well. So the history of judicial misconduct in the United States really does reflect ongoing challenges in maintaining ethical standards. While measures like the Judicial Conduct and Disability Act have been implemented to address these issues, recent cases indicate that continued and reform are necessary to uphold the integrity of the judicial system to make sure that we have the public's trust. So, within my read of Judicial Misconduct and Public Confidence in the Rule of Law by David Sascher, I believe is his name. I'm not sure if I pronounced it right, so I apologize if I didn't. But I just listed some quotes that I thought were interesting that kind of went along with the history of it. So, first, we have quote, "Judicial misconduct comes in many forms and ethical standards, addresses problematic actions, omissions, and relationships that deplete public confidence." So that goes hand in hand with what I was just saying. But this does highlight the long-standing issue of judicial misconduct and its impact on public trust, which has been an ongoing issue in the United States legal system for years on end. And the next quote I put was, "Judges must, therefore, be accountable to legal and ethical standards. In holding them accountable for their behavior, judicial conduct review must be performed without invading the independence of judicial decision-making." So I'd say that this kind of reflects the effort to balance judicial independence with accountability. A key part of the judicial misconduct review process that began in the late 20th century, like with the laws of the Judicial Conduct and Disability Act of 1980, which is what we just talked about before. And then the next quote I have is, "Judicial misconduct poses a significant threat to the integrity of the criminal justice system, undermining public trust and fairness in legal proceedings." So this kind of underscores the ongoing issue of judicial misconduct and its continued relevance in modern discussions on the health of judiciary. And then lastly, we've got, quote, "Public discipline serves the dual purpose of correcting the judge in question as well as educating others in the judiciary. So this kind of demonstrates the current state of judicial misconduct oversight, where discipline not only addresses the individual judge's actions, but it also aims to set a precedent for the rest of the community, and it kind of helps us understand the need for accountability. So I would say that these quotes do directly tie into the history and current state of judicial misconduct, and it helps us understand the ongoing challenges and the reforms in place to address issues that happened in the past. So, to start off, judicial misconduct can have very far-reaching consequences on the criminal justice system, impacting various aspects from courtroom operations to the rights of defendants and the experiences of crime victims. So here's a little bit on how judicial misconduct affects different elements within the system. So starting off, we've got impact of judicial misconduct, criminal courts, and the courtroom work group. So first, we have disruption of courtroom dynamics. So I'd say that judicial misconduct can really disrupt the balance and fairness in the courtroom. Judges are the central authority figure that they kind of help us guide the proceedings and ensure proper conduct. So misconduct such as bias or conflicts of interest can really skew the legal process and undermine the credibility of the court. So this might not only affect the judge's authority, but can also cause large tension between courtroom workgroup members, so the prosecutors, defense attorneys, and court staff, who depend on the judge's impartiality to effectively perform their roles. So I can definitely understand how that can be a key issue. Secondly, when a judge engages in misconduct, it can lead to frustration and maybe distrust among the courtroom workgroup members. This can undermine cooperation and lead to much poorer decision making, affecting how cases are prosecuted and defended. So in extreme cases, I'd say that the integrity of the judicial system may be questioned by all parties involved, including attorneys and jurors. So next, we have the impact on the pretrial and trial process. So misconduct at the pretrial, it's like a tongue twister, stage can severely impact the fairness of proceedings. Judges are responsible, I'd say, for ensuring due process is followed, such as ensuring defendants' rights are respected and that the rules of evidence are applied correctly. If a judge commits an act of bias or a conflict of interest, such as failing to rescue themselves from cases involving personal connections, it can really jeopardize the defendant's right to a fair trial. And then we've got bias and prejudgment. So judges who exhibit personal bias or prejudge cases based on external factors can make improper rulings during this trial process, which I do think this goes back into what I said earlier about intentionality. That's definitely not a word, I just made it up. Intentional misconduct. Sometimes they might not come in to this with judicial misconduct, but because of their own personal experiences or someone they know, they may have presumptions about the case and be using their own personal judgment instead of looking at the provided evidence, which is definitely unfair. But I do think that is a part of humanity. So it is really difficult because these judges are almost enforced to be robotic, but they can't be because they're human. But I'm kind of getting a little bit sidetracked. So I'd say that a good example of this is if a judge is overly harsh towards a defendant due to personal beliefs, political beliefs, it does compromise the defendant's rights to an impartial trial. This can lead to an unfair ruling, or it can ultimately affect the trial's outcome, which is not what we want. So next, we have impact of those accused of a crime. So the accused individuals face the direct consequences of judicial misconduct, as it can lead to unjust rulings, such as wrongful convictions, harsher sentences, or even violations of their rights. If a judge is biased or engages in this unethical behavior, the accused's abilities to receive a fair hearing obviously is limited. So, for the legal resource and accountability, victims of judicial misconduct might face unnecessary delays or biased decisions that can lead to wrongful convictions or an acquittal. In cases where a judge improperly influences the proceedings, the accused may be deprived of the chance to prove their own innocence or have their case heard properly by the media or the public. This further harms their legal rights. Okay. And then we've got impact on crime victims. So, crime victims expect justice to be served through fair trials that hold offenders accountable, obvious, but judicial misconduct can be disrupted through this expectation, especially if the results and unjust verdicts or sentences undermine the victim's pursuit of justice. For instance, if a biased or corrupt judge may dismiss key evidence or grant leniency sentences, it may undermine the victim's sense of justice. Also, so the erosion of trust in the system is supposed to be its own bullet point, so I apologize about that. Crime victims, so I'll just go over that now. Crime victims who witness judicial misconduct in high-profile cases will definitely lose faith in the judicial system's ability to deliver justice fairly. If they do think that a judge's personal bias may have led to an unfair verdict or lenient sentence, it can have a lasting effect on their trust in the justice system and its ability to protect them. So that kind of reflects back on the graph that I showed. I guess there might have been an increase in some crime or something of that matter, where there was a large spike during the years of 2019 to 2022. So, lastly, the increased emotional and psychological toll. So, the emotional toll on crime victims can be compounded if judicial misconduct affects the case. This unfair ruling or trials that have ethical issues can add to the trauma victims that they already have endured from the crime itself, and this can lead to prolonged feelings or disillusionment and helplessness over this issue. So, judicial misconduct significantly interrupts the fairness and integrity of criminal courts, and it can affect the people who interact with the system, whether it is the courtroom professionals, the accused of the crime, or the victims themselves. So there really is a negative to this misconduct through all lenses, even though sometimes a victim of a crime might get the justice that they want through it. They're not understanding how that may affect the media or other people involved in the case. So I do think that was definitely more interesting to take a deeper dive on how it can affect different groups within the criminal justice system. So now moving on to challenges. criminal courtrooms, work group, impacting the functionality, integrity, and fairness of the justice system. So, first, we've got the challenge of maintaining judicial independence. Judicial misconduct often involves ethical violations that can occur due to personal biases. However, efforts to investigate the addressed judicial misconduct must be done very carefully to avoid infringing or on the judicial independence necessary to make fair decisions. Balancing accountability with the protection of judges poses a very critical challenge, as too much oversight can compromise a judge's ability to make impartial decisions based on the law, not political or societal pressures. And then next, judges may face political pressure, especially for the more high-profile criminal cases, because they don't want society's or social media's backlash to hit them. But if a judge does become embroiled in this misconduct, such as accepting bribes or being influenced by the public, it really does risk undermining the rule of law. So, impact on the courtroom work group. The tension among courtroom participants creates an environment of mistrust among the courtroom work group, including prosecutors, defense attorneys, and the court staff. And when judges engage in this unethical behavior, such as bias ruling, whatever, it strains the working relationship between the various members of the courtroom work group. Lawyers, for example, I think they may feel compelled to question the fairness of a judge's ruling, which may lead to a delay or a lack of cooperation within the courtroom as a whole. So, in addition, when a judge's misconduct creates a toxic environment, it really diminishes the professionalism that's required for this the legal system to function effectively. Attorneys may feel in a particular way that their arguments and evidence are dismissed unfairly due to a personal bias or a conflict of interest, and this will lead them to obviously some sort of dissatisfaction within the legal profession. So, next, when we're thinking about the public's perception, when this comes to light, it can severely damage public trust in the judicial system. If judges are perceived to act unethically, especially in criminal cases, it can lead to a general public perception that courts are bad, biased, corrupt, or unfair. And this loss of confidence impacts not just the immediate parties involved within the case, but it has a long-lasting effect on the public's view of the justice system. So it restores public confidence. Restoring public confidence is a challenge when misconduct becomes widespread through the media. Holding judges accountable for misconduct is inherently difficult due to the protected status of judges, especially in terms of judicial immunity. So missteps by judges often go unpunished unless there is a clear violation of ethics. And because of this, it may be overlooked or handled with leniency. This is obviously a challenge in ensuring that judges are held to the same standards as other people in the world who commit unethical acts. Excuse me one second. I just got a little lost on my slide. It's being a little slow. So, when taking a look at unfair treatment of defendants, apologize for the wait, this can directly affect the accused in criminal cases. The bias or improper rulings, will result to an unfair trial, unfortunately. And this could lead to wrongful convictions or a harsher sentence than they really deserve. Secondly, we've got injustice for crime victims. So, within criminal cases, they can also have a negative impact on crime victims, actually, which is something I didn't really think about a lot. If a judge's unethical behavior leads to a wrongful acquittal of a perpetrator or a reduced sentence, it denies the victims justice, and they may feel that their experience was minimized or dismissed when the justice system fails to operate impartially. So, one of our last difficulties in prevention and education is the lack of comprehensive training, which obviously ensures that judges and other courtroom participants are well versed in ethics and standards of conduct, which is crucial, obviously, to prevent judicial misconduct. However, not all systems have sufficient programs in place to provide consistent ethical trainings. So some judges may have obviously they've gone through schooling, but after a while, if they're not being consistently trained, they may resort to their own brain and their own opinions on a case, which is obviously not the actions that we want them to take. But we also have cultural challenges, which is something I also didn't really think about much. But some jurisdictions may have a culture of leniency, or they might be harsher on certain cultures. This is where ethical breaches are viewed as part of the process or are not adequately addressed. So changing this culture requires ongoing advocacy and education to be continued throughout their process as a judge. And a challenge in courts where misconduct may be more normalized or ignored due to institutional inertia or a lack of accountability. So, we thought of some potential solutions. So, first, I would say that we need to broaden the oversight and strengthen judicial conduct commissions. These bodies should have clear authority, resources, and the power to conduct transparent investigations and impose meaningful sanctions when necessary. And this would really help the judges this would really help us ensure that judges are held accountable for their actions, and it will help us have better public trust within the judicial system. Transparency in the process would also help rebuild public confidence in the courts. So next, we have comprehensive ethics, training, and continuing education, which is something I mentioned 1 or 2 slides back. So I think it should be mandatory for ongoing ethics training for judges, because you don't want them to resort to their own personal beliefs or conflicts of interest. And by proactively addressing these ethical concerns, this would help ensure that all court participants are well versed in judicial conduct, and the risk of misconduct will be reduced, hopefully. And continuous education would help foster a culture of professionalism and just keep that ball rolling of that education does matter, and it should be continued throughout their time that they serve. And lastly, we need to increase transparency in the disciplinary process by publicly reporting cases of judicial misconduct. This will help ensure public trust in the system. This will help media not go ballistic after something, because if we're totally honest about it, there will be a lack of speculation and conspiracy theories and all that. So transparency in handling misconduct cases also acts as a deterrent discouraging potential violations, and reinforcing the integrity of the system. So these are my citations, and thanks for listening.